We are launching, and I'll use the hashtag because that's how young people speak these days, but I know that it has a great impact when we communicate our messages in these exciting, concise ways that so many people can identify with. So hashtag Africangiving for those of you who are active on social media and will be writing and talking about this campaign. What is this about? We are introducing you and launching the Kisima African Resilience Initiative, okay? We are showcasing today African stories on giving and putting the spotlight on a family level, community level, and of course the national level philanthropy. And I think this is very important. Why am I saying this? At a time like this, when so much of what we know has been turned upside down through this pandemic that we didn't invite, the world of work has changed. So many people have lost their jobs. And we know the inequality when it comes to access to technology, access to education. Some children in some parts of the world, in our societies, were able to learn, while others, because of exclusion, were not able to learn. We are sitting here as the African continent and listening to Western governments urging young people who are 12 and 14 to come and get the vaccine, whereas the most vulnerable members of our society in Africa, in the global south, have not gotten the vaccine. So I think there is no point sugarcoating this. The gap between those who have and those who do not have is getting wider and wider. But how's this for inspiration? During the hard lockdown in South Africa last year, I was quite fascinated to observe the anger when it came to the distribution of food parcels. For those of you who are not familiar with the story, in the early days, we had NGOs, we had communities, we had even corporate citizens wanting to distribute food packages and other health products to vulnerable communities. What happened? The government wanted to centralize the giving. They wanted to control how everything goes. Now, we can criticize the government, but their intention was to ensure that we don't have super spreader events, that we have proper channels where social distancing and hygienic protocols would be observed. But it didn't go so well because governments have a lot of work to do. But the anger of ordinary South Africans towards the government, why? Because they just wanted to give. They just wanted to do what comes naturally to them. They wanted to go out there in their communities to assist. They wanted to go to their churches. And they were saying, hey, this is not something new. We do this all the time. We run these soup kitchens. We share our education material with children who don't have access. So why are you trying to control it now? I do think that in spite of the anger and the high temperature and energy of that particular episode in South Africa, it demonstrated something that is pivotal, something that is inspirational, and something that is very central to the theme of this initiative, and that is Africans do give, they want to give. The second example that I want to share is that even as we struggle our way through vaccinations and registering and debating whether it is correct to have a digital infrastructure for people to register when so many don't even have access to these gadgets and this data. It's been so wonderful to listen to a lot of my fellow country women and men saying, you know, if I could, I would give up my vaccine for somebody who needs it the most. I'm not going to get my vaccine until the most vulnerable communities have their vaccines. What does that mean? It means that there is an instinct to giving, but it also means that we don't need to have giving legislated upon. It's great when it's at a legislative and policy framework, but that it is something that communities, that families, that neighbors, that members of society just instinctively know it is the right thing to do. So this is a continental campaign to highlight African giving through positive storytelling across the continent, not just the examples that I've used of Johannesburg, South Africa. We'll be hosting conversations on how Africans can mobilize resources towards the public good, as we have been doing so already, but just to scale it up a tad. This campaign didn't just come out of somebody just musing and thinking, what can I do? But it's actually well researched. It comes and it's inspired by research on the impact of COVID-19 on three sectors: philanthropy, civil society, and corporate social investments, whose findings confirm exactly what I've been saying, that Africans are forever ready to help and give. So the needs, therefore, to be a platform to showcase these good stories so that they can inspire others to do the same. We can't wait for the global north to cover us in the way that we truly are. We ought to be amplifying our voices and showcasing those stories. So this is what we are going to do today. And we know that if Africans rally together and pool their resources together, there is no challenge that we cannot overcome. So other CAPSI initiatives also provide the basis for the campaign, and we'll hear more about the research, about the state of philanthropy in the continent among high net worth individuals, communities, foundations, individuals, and corporates. I do want to tell you very briefly about the second component of the initiative. It consists of a campaign, really, to raise funds and other forms of resources towards specific continental causes or needs. So in case you are wondering what Kisima is all about, we have plurality of voices and a diversity of cultures and languages here in South Africa. In Africa, we wouldn't be launching a campaign that speaks only to one language and one form of identity. So Kisima means a well or a spring, and we know that water is the source of life. In Sesotho, it is called Sidiba. In Nguni language, it is called Umthombo. And in Swahili, as we know, one of the most spoken languages on the continent, it is called Kisima. So with those few words, I welcome you to our launch today, giving the African way this Africa Month. It was last month, but it's the early days of June, and the theme can certainly stand the test of time and continue. We're getting into our program. We're going to have various speakers from the different organizations that I have just mentioned. We're going to hear more about research. We're going to have some song and dance as we carry on, and then I will be moderating a debate and a discussion. I want to say that you are all VIPs today. I'm delighted to welcome every single one of you from the organizations mentioned, and also just engaged citizens who want to be a part of this conversation. A special welcome to you, but also a special welcome to Dr. John Kengasong, whom we've seen all over the news talking about access to vaccinations, talking about the toll that the pandemic has taken on our continent and the need for us to be enterprising, to innovate, and to challenge these barriers, these global barriers to access to life-saving medication and treatment. And of course, he is with the African Union Center for Disease Control. But to start us off, our hosts today, Wits Business School, I welcome Professor Maurice Khadebe to give us a welcome and an opening message.
Thank you very much, Radebe, for those kind introduction, and you've already inspired me. You know, I'm already inspired by the way you just explain Kisima. You know.
I think you've frozen a bit, Prof, but let's just try. Can you all still hear Professor Maurice Khadebe?
We're launching Kisima here and Africangiving, and as you said, Africangiving is not something that is new. We've been doing it all the time. You know, since you told us your own story, I tell you my own story. I think I was 3 years or 4 years old. Was born in Katlehong in the township. My maternal grandmother. It was a very poor environment, but every now and then we'll run out of sugar, and my grandmother will give me an empty cup of sugar and just basically says, go next door and go and borrow sugar. And I would go there innocently, not even aware that, you know, I'm going to borrow sugar, and I'm not even embarrassed by that. And my neighbor would borrow us that cup of sugar, and at the end of the month, my grandmother would say, go and pay it back. And the same thing happens to them when they run out of salt. They'll come to us and we'll give it to them. So it was just natural to give us as African, and then we call it obviously Ubuntu. So I think it's very, very important that we don't lose this very, very giving and generosity of spirit that we as African have. And so launching an initiative like this one, we at Wits Business School are very feeling really honored and humbled to have that opportunity to be part of this initiative and help initiate it. I'd like at this particular moment to give all credit to Professor Begi Moyo and the entire team that has really worked hard, that is looking after CAPSI, the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment. This center is based here at WBS, Wits Business School. It's got my full support as the head of school, the entire team and all the professors that are doing tremendous amount of research work on this subject, and also mobilizing resources, particularly for our continent. We all know that the pandemic has really devastated, particularly our continent, our healthcare system, our education system, our people. It has exacerbated the levels of poverty, exacerbated the levels of unemployment, inequality. It's massive. And therefore, we need to continuously take full responsibility and accountability of making sure that we help our own people. And before we go outside and get help, we must have that spirit of helping our own. And we have it. We just need to make sure that we nurture it, we encourage it, we showcase it. And I'm so glad to have I can't seem to live stream on my end. So, Tandy, I think there's some help that is required here. Also thank Dr. John from the CDC. We really appreciate your presence here, and many other people who are here, who are all dignitaries, and the panelists that is here. We welcome you. So we as WBS, I would like to tell you right now that personally, I support this initiative. I support Professor Begi Moyo, and I support the entire process. And we will be there. You can count on us on all the aspects of this initiative. So I'm not going to take too much time now. Radebe, I'll hand it over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. You know, I was laughing when you were talking about the sugar and the salt situation in the township because it's so familiar. We did it all the time. You'd be glad to know that we're even bringing it to the suburbs. Just last week, I was afflicted by a cold, and I could hear children laughing in my neighbor's side of the fence. And I thought, I'm hungry. I can't cook. It's cold. I'm sick. I just sent a WhatsApp to say, I need food. And they said, enough for me to feed my whole family. So we will change these things, these very little simple acts. But if we research them further, we reflect on them, we theorize them, and we formalize them in this way, they really can change our societies and our communities. Thank you so very much. We are in a moment going to hear from Dr. John. But before that, it wouldn't be an African event if we can't have music that is central to the theme. I'm going to ask that everybody who's not speaking, just mute yourself, just close your video, and let's just reflect on the poignant themes that our artist is going to be telling us about. Gugulethu Khumalo is best known by her stage name, Berita. She's a Zimbabwean-born singer, a songwriter, and music producer. Her music is a combination of soul music containing elements from Afro jazz, contemporary pop influences, as well as South African dance music. So she will just galvanize us all and stir our spirits through this rendition. Over to you, Berita.
Pagama Africa, Pagama, Pagama, Pagama Africa. Ooh. Ooh. Too many times you've been victimized and utilized. They've taken your riches away. They say you're not worth enough. Isizwe sakuthi siyalila. masibamba nenizandla phakama Africa phakama 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 Africa Africa ma phakama Africa phakama 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 Africa Too many times you've been victimized and utilized. They've taken your riches away, filled you with poverty and diseases. They say you're not worthy now. Masibamba nenizandla Africa ma Africa ma phakama Africa phakama 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 Africa Africa mama Africa ma Africa ma phakama phakama yeah phakama Africa. Thank you so much.
Yay, Berita, thank you so very much. And we hear you loudly and clearly. Phakama Africa, rise up, Africa. Africa, rise. And we hope to rise to the occasion and meet that challenge. Thank you so very much for gracing our occasion. And we're going to hear from you later on as we wrap up our event today. Okay, so I am going to ask everybody, again, keep yourselves muted and your video off if you're not speaking, and also your cell phones, if they can be on silent. I do know that we like to have conversation, and this event today is about storytelling, giving through storytelling and sharing these positive initiatives and stories. So perhaps you may have some comments that you want to make, start thinking about them. I'm going to be moderating a panel discussion. We do have a chat box where you can put your comments and your questions, and we'll find a way of circling them back to me so that I can reflect on them as relevant themes during our panel conversation. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. John Nkengasong, who is with the African Union CDC, basically just representing the entire continent, trying to strengthen our public health institutions to respond adequately to this existential threat to Africa. But it's not just about the negative and the overwhelming stories. I've seen Dr. John on various platforms, international media, local media, webinars as the director of the Africa CDC, also talking about the potential, also talking about what is possible, and also reflecting on the work that is already done. The road ahead is long, but we are making progress. There are some challenges to accessing vaccines and so on. But I would boldly say, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, Dr. John, that the fabric of our society has not been decimated or annihilated by this pandemic. Instead, I have seen us as Africans looking out for one another, bringing our expertise and our goodwill to make sure that Africa is not brought to her knees by this pandemic. We would like to hear from you about today's theme. Dr. John, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Greetings from the headquarters of the CDC and the headquarters of the African Union Commission. First of all, let me really take time off to recognize the wonderful and very powerful introduction ready that you did for this event. And also acknowledge Professor Radebe for his very heartwarming remarks. I take away two things there, the generosity of spirit and the Ubuntu. And also, of course, extend my appreciation to Professor Moyo and others from the Wits University for making me part of this important event. I can see that my friend Amine Idriss has turned on his video so that I should know that he's on. Amine, greetings from Addis Ababa. And Reddy, let me say that I was a bit skeptical to whether to endorse a Kisima Resilient Initiative, but with this kind of music and with your very powerful remarks, let me start with the end in mind to say that we at Africa CDC fully endorse and will support the Kisima Resilient Initiative. With that kind of music, I don't know who else can not afford to do that. So let me, I was asked to make a few remarks, and in the next 10 minutes, I'll cover a few points about values and following through what Professor Radebe just mentioned. Values such as giving and storytelling are an important aspect in most African societies and culture, and we've heard quite a little bit of that during this opening session. Giving and sharing is an important thread in our society, especially in times of need and crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen families and communities come together to help one another in these very trying times when people are getting sick, losing their jobs, and feeling a general sense of uncertainty and anxiety about the future. I mean, let me at this point say two things. One, that the crisis we are facing is unprecedented and it's unpredictable. And second is that it is a generational crisis. I think let's be very clear with that. COVID is not going to go away at any time soon in this year or next year, especially given the scarcity of introduction of vaccines that the continent is facing. Giving is in really our nature. So we have to bond together, stick together as in the spirit of Ubuntu to survive and to survive this for long. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It is therefore no surprise that remittance, for example, are the largest foreign currency earners in Africa, surpassing foreign direct investments. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated what we can achieve with collaboration and solidarity. I'll add to that cooperation and coordination, as the leadership of our continent have actually demonstrated. When COVID hit us, President Cyril Ramaphosa was the chair of the African Union and actually made sure that our strategy was underpinned by the need to collaborate, cooperate, coordinate, and communicate. So Africans have shown resilience when faced with an unknown disease that has impacted their health, lives, society, and financial security. We need to celebrate these African stories of resilience, and the repository proposed in the first dimension of the Kisima Resilience Initiative, which will help in recognizing the successes. I think we need to step back and say, absolutely, Reddy, you are right. We have not been completely wiped out as it was predicted early on. And we have now seen, unfortunately, and I really want to insist, unfortunately, what has happened in India, where when the media was expecting that we will be wiped out by this pandemic, they didn't see that. They said, well, you're not reporting your deaths and you are not reporting people who are infected. We have seen now in India where this virus can actually bring havoc to the community, and you can't hide that. So we have not been hiding deaths. We have been reporting them the way they are. Currently, we are faced with one of the biggest fights of our lives. Vaccines and vaccinations to save African lives and livelihood. It will be a fight that is, I'll put it at the same level as those who fought for our independence on the continent in the 1960s. It's a fight for survival. It's a fight, as you rightly said, existential threat that we are facing. This virus is unpredictable and it can flare at any time and create havoc. We have seen that in India. Safe and efficacious vaccines against this virus are the only sustainable way for ending the pandemic globally and on the African continent. The African Union's ambition is to make sure that we facilitate and enable countries to achieve at least 60% of the vaccination of our continent. That would mean acquiring about 1.4 billion doses of vaccines by 2022, which will require continued close global and continental collaboration. In that spirit, as I indicated earlier, President Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, and at that time, last year, the chair of the African Union, established the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team, commonly called AVAC, to secure 400 million doses of vaccines. And I must say that with joy that we have, through that initiative, secured about 220 million doses of vaccines, with an option of taking it up to about 400 million doses of vaccines. So the point here is that we are not just sitting and rolling our fingers and waiting for, with a bowl in hand for someone from somewhere to come and help us address our vaccine needs. I think we are saying that the health security, we can participate in guaranteeing and safeguarding the health security of our people. So that is the underpinning of that. We need 60% of our population to be vaccinated. COVAX has promised us very generously, and we're very thankful for that, up to about 20 or so % of our population will receive vaccines from that mechanism. So we have a gap there of about 40% to cover. That's why the president wisely decided to establish AVAC last year. As African citizens, we can and must contribute to reach our vaccination target by 2022 to achieve herd immunity. Remember, no one is safe until everyone is safe. We've all used this line over and over, but it's true. African citizens can contribute to reaching the vaccination target either by contributing to vaccine acquisitions, vaccines delivery, or administration of vaccines. We all have the role to play. I always say that vaccines plus vaccinations equals life saved and life economic save. So if you cannot contribute in acquiring vaccines, you can contribute in rolling out vaccinations. And if you do that, we will be saving our economies and livelihood. So as I move towards my conclusion, let me just say this. A campaign can be initiated to set up a fund that appeals to ordinary men and women on the continent, especially young people, to contribute an amount towards vaccination. The values and principles of the fund can emulate the African Union's COVID-19 Response Fund, which has raised funds used to strengthen the continental response to COVID-19. One lesson we have learned from the pandemic is to develop African solutions for African problems. The pandemic has shown the importance of homegrown funding for our challenges and the need to always have a fund with resources to respond urgently to any crisis on the continent. This proposed fund would align with the second dimension of the Kisima Resilience Initiative. Finally, regular and consistent reporting on the impact of our interventions is important to share key messages and stakeholders and partners. The pandemic has provided an opportunity to develop multiple reports for guidance reports shared with member states on COVID-19 response and recommendations on vaccines and vaccinations, as well as, simply put, public health measures. The initiative's third dimension on reporting impact would align with the work we do at Africa CDC to ensure that we communicate to the public, policymakers, journalists, and other key stakeholders. In public health, we say what is measured is supported. So if we begin to articulate the impact of this, the collections that we have in this initiative, it will generate more. I support the Kisima Resilient Initiative as it aligns with my personal belief of solving African problems with African solutions and sharing our successes and achievement. It is time to tell our story and our stories to the rest of the world. Let me just thank you once more for allowing me to be part of this very important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. John, and we are also inspired by your leadership. We know that these matters are complicated, they're not easy, and I think that is why I do want to highlight and remind everyone once again that the Kisima African Resilience Initiative does have this second, the first campaign, its focus on supporting the AUCDC, which you lead, in raising the required resources to procure adequate vaccines for the continent. And I think that is absolutely, absolutely crucial to keep in mind. Don't forget, I'm reminding you once again, if you're joining us, you're part of this webinar and you've fired up, you've got your thoughts, you can start jotting them down, maybe use the chat box, and I'll see if we can accommodate your observations and your reflections during our panel discussion. We are moving along with our program this afternoon, but before we do that, again, we are going to be inspired by the words of Berita. In just a moment, I'll be introducing Berita to come to the stage once again to inspire us all. After that, we will be hearing from the Open Societies Foundations, the Africa Regional Office. I'll be introducing you to Dr. Muthoni Wanyeki, and later on to Dr. Stigmata Tenga, who is with the African Philanthropy Network, and the program will continue. Thank you so very much, Dr. John Nkengasong, for your words there. Let's hear then from Berita one more time.
Thank you so much, Radebe. My musical journey is also a journey of a young African girl coming all the way from Zimbabwe and finding musical acclaim in the Eastern Cape, South Africa, where I believe I was given the opportunity to bloom into this artist that I am today. The next song that I'm going to play for you is a song called Jigizinto. It's a Xhosa song. Jigizinto means things will turn around. And though we are in a global pandemic, I believe zizojigizinto, and we will get through this. Ihlulile minyaka, ndikhangela wena. Ahlulile malanga, ndikhumbula wena. Sihlulile izinsuku, ndifunana nawe. Ngalokhu wena wahamba wangabuyi, ngalokhu wena jigizinto, namhlanje jigizinto, sibuyile sithandwa sam, ndithi jigizinto, my sugar, my sweet love, jigizinto, sibuyile silafathi sam, bendizibuza imibuzo, udlani kwaye uphi, ulala buqokani, bendizibuza imibuzo, uvele uthi qatha, kushintshe sonke isimo, usanganisa umoya wami, usanganisa umoya wami, usanganisa umoya wami, yeah, so jigizinto, so jigizinto, sibuyile silafathi sam, ndithi jigizinto, my sugar, my sweet love, ndithi jigizinto, sibuyile silafathi sam,
my sugar, sugar, my sweet love. Oh. Sugar, sugar, sweet love. Oh. Sugar, sugar, sweet love. Oh. Zo jigi zinto, jigi ndetizo, jigi zinto. Namhlanje zo jigi zinto, zo jigi zinto.
Thank you so very much, Berita. I nearly just got off my chair there and forgot that I was just joining virtually and digitally. But who said that the heart can be stirred by the wisdom in your words, the challenge as well? Zojigizindo, things will change. But we all know that things don't just change from us being passive and doing nothing. They will change through us inspiring each other, rolling up our sleeves, doing our work, sharing resources, and teaching each other. And that's a very important aspect of this launch today, that the research that's being shared about the impact of COVID-19, but not just that, but the pattern, the architecture of African giving. We'll hear more about that as we carry on. Thank you so very much, Berita. Nothing happens without collaboration, without partnerships. So let me welcome a very key partner to this journey that we are beginning together today. Dr. Muthoni Wanyeki from the Open Societies Foundation, Africa Regional Office. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the music. It makes such a difference having that. Thank you. It's beautiful. And I think it puts us in that correct spirit of giving. Mine is very simple. Just to say, on behalf of the Open Society Foundations Network, including the Africa Regional Office where I work, and the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, with whom CAPSI works most closely, let me just say how glad we are to be with you all for this launch of the Kisima Resilience Initiative. I think the fact that the initiative has come together shows the continued and growing interest in what so many of you have already said is actually the age-old tradition of African giving for the purposes of social solidarity. I say age-old because so many of our communities have traditionally found ways to support those within, and more importantly, those outside of family. For those who are religious, those traditions have found expression too in contemporary obligations of Christian tithing and Islamic zakat. They've also found expression in post-independence contributions to the national project. For example, however contested today, the mandatory contributions of Eritreans all over the world to their independence struggle and beyond, or what's become of now equally contested political practice of Harambee in Kenya. More recently, partly in response, if not in resistance, to primarily Western forms of development financing in Africa, including philanthropic giving, there's been a real upsurge of this interest in African philanthropy. Beyond giving as insurance against political risk, we've seen our growing number of high net worth individuals set up foundations that are more than vanity projects. And we've also seen our private sector adopt more formalized forms of corporate social responsibility that are starting, at least starting, to venture out beyond safe social service provisioning. But we've also seen, and never has this been more true in the year that we've all just lived through, many, many individuals who are extremely far from being high net worth individuals, making use of the new platforms available to us, like mobile money and African innovation, I should say, crowdsourcing funding, not just for their own entrepreneurial and social endeavors, but for what are essentially social protection projects. We've seen, for example, individuals last year running private cash transfer projects entirely through mobile money to support those who quite literally fell off the income cliff during the first lockdowns under COVID-19 last year. Which brings me to why we're all here today. We know that there are now several fora for Africans interested in this field to meet, to share ideas, to seek to develop the field of African giving, such as the African Philanthropy Forum, the African Philanthropy Network, just two examples. But there's also CAPSI, who's hosting us all today, set up to much more seriously research the field. It's based in South Africa, but takes a bird's eye Pan-African lens to who's doing what, how, why, and with what results, as well as how all of that relates to what is fundamentally state responsibility to social provisioning as well as to social protection, both in normal circumstances as well as in the circumstances of extreme distress and much heightened risk during pandemics of the sort that we're still living through with COVID-19, and which Dr. John just reminded us will actually be generational for us, as well as man-made and natural disasters, man-made literally. Last year was an extraordinary year for African giving due to COVID-19. As Dr. John has said, we saw the African Union and the African Centers for Disease Control act early and fast. We saw in parallel most AU member states do the same, with most including at least nominal forms of protection measures for those individuals, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as the big corporates who were hit hard by the containment measures of lockdowns and states of emergency. However, these measures and however these ended up working in practice, we also saw the launch of national public and private sector funds to specifically help address COVID-19 needs, all the way from Senegal to South Africa. We saw too the private sector, the African private sector, kickstart important initiatives in support of the AU and the Africa CDC, such as what became the Africa Medical Supplies Platform, also in the end used by our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean community. And we saw, again, many, many individuals and civic initiatives of the sort mentioned above. Ordinary Africans acting in solidarity with those worst hit in immediately meaningful and practical ways. So even as the emergency response to COVID-19 became the much more mid and long-term response that we're in now, we wanted to understand all of the above. OSF has supported CAPSI's research, which our moderator just mentioned, into civic, private sector, philanthropic, and public responses to COVID-19 in Africa. And that research is what has brought us here today to launch this Kisima Resilience Initiative. As our moderator explained, much more eloquently and cheerfully than I am doing right now, Kisima means well in Kiswahili. And that well is what we really showed. We were all so capable of filling and dipping into and sharing last year and into this year. The Kisima Resilience Initiative is a campaign. It's a campaign, first of all, to tell all those stories about how we give, why, from and to whom, to what ends. Those stories really do need to be known. They need to be celebrated, and they need to be used to inspire. It's a campaign too to let us talk about what those stories mean, where they've taken the individuals involved and where they could take us all in a much deeper, more profound and structural way. And it's a campaign to report on and advocate around what we learn, how to make it much easier for all of us to contribute to our national and Pan-African projects like the Africa CDC. And ultimately, it's a campaign to literally put our money where our mouth is and support our African CDC, but that will come a little bit down the road. This workshop, therefore, is an invitation to all of us to join that campaign. Thank you so much for letting myself and all of OSF be part of this journey.
Thank you so very much. Really, really appreciate your words, your message, Dr. Wanyeki, but also that sobering reminder that just because an initiative has philanthropy in it or giving in it, doesn't mean that it must escape scrutiny. We do know that the global architecture of philanthropic organizations do themselves reflect some of the exasperating exclusions that we sometimes see in our society, whether we're talking race, representation, gender, you name it, or whose voice is amplified, who gets to speak, who gets to lead these kind of journeys. So thank you very much for reminding us of those challenging themes as well, Dr. Muthoni Wanyeki. Right now, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Stigmata Tenga, who's with the African Philanthropy Network. And just to give us, you're right, just to give us an overview of the domestic philanthropy and community philanthropy overview. And again, just reminding you to please keep your microphones on mute and your videos off while Dr. Tenga speaks to us. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Tenga. Over to you.
Thank you, Radebe. Thank you so very much. I greet you all from the Africa Philanthropy Network. And I would like to assume that the protocol has been observed. I appreciate and followed Dr. John's conversation and Dr. Wanyeki's conversation. And really, I need to appreciate how refreshing the songs from Berita were in such a difficult time and in such an important conversation. To hear a song that is being sung very nicely in African language, it is very, very refreshing, and it reminds us about our roots. So just for everyone, just to let you know that the mission of Africa Philanthropy Network is to reclaim the power and elevate various practices in African philanthropy. And when we say to reclaim the power, we mean it is our voice. We mean it is our ability to act. We also mean it is our resources. And when we consider African philanthropy, it is very, very important to consider who is giving, to whom it is given, and how it is being given. So APN is working in collaboration and partnership with its members and other philanthropy support organizations, including CAPS, and we are very happy to be here under the invitation of CAPS. And for that, we together promote the voice and action for African philanthropy. And we have been doing this through building a movement and a movement of solidarity to respond to various African challenges. We have been doing this through growing the voice and visibility of African philanthropy, through civil society actors and leaders in the philanthropy movement. But also we have been doing this through ensuring that we have an infrastructure and a go-to platform in the continent that can accommodate various conversations as a safe space to talk about African philanthropy and to nurture it where it is emerging, but also to celebrate it where it is already existing. I would like to say that it has been said very well by the previous speakers that giving is a practice that is part of the African's DNA. And in many African countries and societies, that practice is there, and it has historically formed a foundation for social transformation and social cohesion. And also today, if we speak with any community, most of the community will let you know how do they refer philanthropic giving in their community. I hear in Akani, in Ghana, they say it's in Toboa. In my neighbors, Kenya, they say it's Arambe. In Rwanda, they're talking about Ubuhende. In South Africa, I think there are many different things, including stock bells. But in Tanzania, we are calling it Msaragambo. And all these have been part and parcel of African lives and a way to socialize and a way to build cohesion. But also there are even sayings and proverbs in Africa that speaks to the act of giving and the heart that gives. to let you know that this is just at the center of everything that Africans have in their DNA. I'll just speak to one proverb that is in Kiswahili. It says, kutoa ni moyo, usambe ni utajiri. That means giving is a heart and not a symbol of access or wealth. And we have seen that poor people give. They even give to the rich people, albeit small, but they give to the rich people. And also philanthropy in the continent, much as we refer to it in different terminologies, terms and concepts and cultures, it is very difficult to separate from our identity because it is very much embedded in the spirit of solidarity and the spirit of Ubuntu. We believe in the fact that one lives because other people are in existence. So Africangiving, in all its different forms, has long played important role in the continent, and it is an important instrument for accountability, mutual cooperation, and trust. We at APN are characterizing giving in two different forms. One is that of the vertical nature, where you have more formal institutionalized kind of giving. Here you have foundations, funds, you have some of the NGOs who are legally registered, and increasingly we are having community foundations. But also there is another one which is of horizontal in nature, which mostly consists of indigenous vehicles for giving. And this is a philanthropy or a giving practice which is very, very utilized in the community, in our communities. It is more organic. It tends to be more responsive. It tends to be more inclusive. On this kind of giving, you don't have a recipient and a receiver. So those who are supposed or regarded as recipients, they retain their dignity and they are even more active in the process of the philanthropic giving. And today I was asked to speak about domestic philanthropy and community philanthropy. So it's like we're talking about different kind of giving when we go to the community. But again, I've just said this is something that we live with. It's part and parcel of our way of living. And you will agree with me, and the previous speakers have also mentioned, individual and community philanthropy as a practice have deep roots in the continent. They have served as vehicles for social cohesion in the context where people have been oppressed and marginalized, and they continue to do so. We have seen in the times of COVID. So when we speak about different kind of philanthropy, we speak about philanthropy and making it different. We are not speaking about changing people's perception. We are speaking about asking or reminding Africans the power that is encompassed with their giving, and asking them to appreciate that and start to give for change, start to utilize that power, so change their perspective towards giving. And African gives, as we have all said, and we have heard this morning from the beginning, but we oftentimes give to help. Most of us give for charitable causes. We give a lot, but our giving is not structured. So we see, and you can all agree with me, our giving is not helping us to change our continental challenges. So now more than ever, I think we need to find ways to build that culture of domestic giving, that culture of people giving, to give for change, to especially to focus on social justice, where that's the area which is very much underinvested. And Kisima, it's coming to do only that and nothing else. And again, when at Africa Philanthropy Network, with all our members, when we speak about community philanthropy, we don't speak about the philanthropy that is being practiced somewhere else. Here we speak of a deliberate strategy for development, an alternative strategy for development, because we believe it works. Systems of community giving and self-help have always been there in our communities. They come with different traditions and different cultures. But recently, we started to talk and give visibility to domestic and community philanthropy. And with COVID-19, we are witnessing members of the community being helping each other, and they give their private resources for social good. And that is the point to celebrate. But it's not because of COVID-19. It's because this type of giving has always existed in African culture. This is inclusive, and it is a caring practice which is fundamental in community philanthropy that we are talking about. How about building on what we have got? Rallying around Kisima conversations, and later encourage external supporters to help us where we believe that would not be able to achieve. And I think this conversation is all about that. So community philanthropy, which represents an evolving and a more democratic movement in the philanthropy field that centers asset building, knowledge, capacity, and trust as foundational pillars is the community philanthropy we are talking about. It is a community philanthropy that is based on an idea that all communities have assets, and when pulled together, they build collective power and voice. It's a flattening power system that is key to sustainable development because it ensures horizontal and mutual accountability. It allows multiple perspectives to be heard. It is both a form of and a force for community-driven development. We have conversations around localization, which I think in our space, we say community-led development. So this is the practice that is important to adopt to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So when we want to give in order to address continental challenges, I believe that at the center, we need to reclaim domestic resources, both financial and non-financial resources, to address our challenges. As a continent, I think it is so important to elevate existing good practices, innovations, and make policies that inspire and promote both domestic and community philanthropy to thrive. And also to strengthen collaboration and balance the power of state, markets, and community for them to be able to work together and build a broader understanding of what it means to resource a long-term and sustainable and resilient development. Within civil society space, I believe this vision can happen through a greater appreciation and recognition that people in the community have the best understanding of what change looks like. They have the best understanding and capacity of what is needed to improve their own lives. And at the philanthropy landscape in the continent, because it has evolved so much, and on the journey that we have used to build social cohesion and improve life, we have learned that one needs to work with people. And for that, one thing which I believe it will be beneficial is to think about how to build more effective communities and diverse civil societies. No doubt, there is a significant role played by domestic philanthropy and community philanthropy in supporting continental responses now to COVID, but also there is no doubt that we really need to nurture the domestic and community philanthropy to support continents to even better prepare for such disasters in the near future. To conclude, I would like to share a few things which I believe they could be part of the DNA when we think about how to mobilize and consolidate efforts in the community. I think the first one is leadership. We need to build the leadership that will strengthen civil society resilience and community resources for long-term sustainability. And the second one is community engagement. And here we understand that communities are diverse places, but everyone in the community needs to be part of the solution, those seen and those that are not seen. So we have to work in collaboration and ensure that policymaking processes and programming lenses sees everyone, and everyone has been included. And the last one, as part of the DNA, which I would like us to consider, is to focus on structures that prevent communities from thriving. We have learned together that gender inequality, and social exclusion do leave other sections of population behind. And I have learned to believe that when you have a systemic breakdown, the only way to address it is by systemic build-up. The only way to address it is to take every single system and structure that touches that individual and make sure to reinforce it. To take care of every single system and structure that is supposed to support that community and use all and every means we have to make sure that we have been able to do only that. Our job is not to save people. I believe our job is to move barriers that have been constructed in front of people. So let's rally around Kisima, make sure that we are building resilience around Kisima and tell the tale of African philanthropy through Kisima. I believe that there is a lot of dignity in influencing our own destiny in the spirit of solidarity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much for that powerful message and reminding us once again that we need to do more. We need to go further than just giving. We've got to remove the barriers that keep people marginalized, that keep people excluded. In the media, journalists often say that we're covering people that can't be heard. There is no one who can't be heard. There is nobody who can't be heard. There is nobody who can't be seen. But we choose that. These are choices. These are editorial choices. These are policy choices to exclude, to erase, to not hear. So those barriers need to move forward. And I feel particularly challenged as well by your message that while there is absolutely nothing wrong to give in emergencies, to give as an immediate form of response to an emergency, we do need to create these vertical formal structures so that the giving that we do changes communities, it changes societies, and it contributes to the larger continental project. So thank you very much for that message. Really appreciated, Dr. Tenga. We're moving on. We are going now to hear about reflections and a call to action and African giving for African problems. This is a message from Mama Gracia Machel, who could not be with us today, but we are delighted to welcome his special advisor, Leila Akalun, who is coming to speak to us about these reflections and speaking for Mama Gracia Machel as her special advisor. Over to you, Leila.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Radebe. And good afternoon to all the esteemed guests and distinguished partners of this groundbreaking launch of the Kisima Resilience Initiative. Indeed, I bring you greetings from Mrs. Machel, who would have loved to be here today, but has been called away from her desk and asked that I deliver remarks on her behalf, as she wanted to be sure to lend her support to this important initiative. Telling stories through music and art is one of the strongest ways of creating consciousness and awareness, especially on complex and very sensitive issues. And thank you, Barita, for your beautiful performances, which are so indicative of the important role and the creative industry plays during times of crisis. It is my hope that as we launch this important initiative by CAPSI and African Open Society Foundations about African resilience, we can celebrate our cultures of giving and sharing. We were not ready nor prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating effects. And the last 15 months have been the hardest for everyone. We have all lost loved ones. Our lives have changed and livelihoods have been severely affected. Poverty and inequality have deepened. Economies have stagnated and institutions have been paralyzed. Life is no longer the same, and we will never again be the same. We are demoralized, traumatized, and frankly, most of us have lost hope. And at the moment, it looks as though there is no light at the end of the tunnel. However, yet, in the midst of all of these uncertainties and hopelessness, we have also seen an increase in solidarity and giving initiatives. It is the nature of us as Africans to give at all times, but in more pronounced ways during times of despair and need. History is full of these stories of resilience. We have not celebrated these actions enough, however. Neither have we popularized them widely enough. Over the last year and a half, families have come together to help each other. Neighbors have collectively responded to deaths, to sickness, and to shortages of food and medical supplies. Communities have pooled resources. Businesses, civil society, philanthropists, and governments have all mobilized different kinds of resources to deal with the various dimensions of the pandemic. We need to tell these positive stories and give hope once again to humanity. With most countries vaccinating their civilians, an array of hope has begun shining with this effort. We need to mobilize to ensure that more people are able to take the vaccines. This is one of the best ways to remain resilient. As stated already, beyond collecting stories and creating a repository of positive narratives, the Kisima initiative seeks to establish a Pan-African fund to provide urgent funding when a disaster strikes our continent. We will be working hard in the next months to collect stories and finalize details around the fund, so stay tuned. We have to demonstrate the impact of our interventions, and through this initiative, we seek to connect positive stories, resources, and impact positively people's lives. This groundbreaking initiative has my full support, and I look forward to your long-term commitment and involvement to all the partners and guests here today. It is only when we work together that we will be able to overcome what appears to be gloom and doom now. The world has seen dark calamities before, and through perseverance, unity, and a collective effort, we have navigated these challenges as one human family to brighter days. So let us harness that spirit of solidarity and work together as we fight our way out of this pandemic to a new, brighter reality. I thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you. I must say it was wonderful to be with you and to hear your intentionality, the passion in your voice, but you'll forgive me because I heard your words in Mama Gracia Machel's voice. You know, as you were delivering them, I was hearing her voice in my ear. Give her our love, and we love and value her, and we can't imagine these massive life-changing initiatives without her warmth and without her leadership and her wisdom as well. Thank you so very much. Thanks.
I will do. Thank you, Radebe.
Okay. Now, moving along, we saw you earlier, Mr. Amine Idriss Adoum, talking to us about One Africa, the importance of giving to achieve unity in the continent. And it takes me back, it links very significantly to what everyone else has been saying today and what Dr. Tenga had said about the domestic overview, but also thinking about how we start with our communities and scale it up. A continental trajectory will not be achievable without starting with our communities. One Africa will not be possible without unity in giving. So let's hear from you. #AfricaWeWant, telling us more about Agenda 2063. Mr. Amine Idriss Adoum giving us perspective from NEPAD, New Partnership for Africa's Development. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. When we talk about giving, we usually should talk about the two ways actually that we give in the continent. There is the traditional solidarity, but there is also, and there should be, a more structured solidarity. The traditional solidarity is what sociologists and specialists call usually the mechanical solidarity. The mechanical solidarity is really about bringing support, providing support to families, to friends, to the communities from the personal level. And you can see here that is working pretty well, because if you look at actually the amount of remittances that is being sent from the African diaspora to the continent, it was about 48 to 50 billion dollars last year in 2019, for example. And this remittance coming from the diaspora is mostly supporting families, food, but also school, education, health, and so many things. But this solidarity is only one piece of the iceberg, because Going in parallel with that one, you have also the solidarity coming from African people living in other African countries, and for which we don't really have accounted for. You have as well this solidarity coming from professional people, business people supporting their families, their friends, and everyone. So this is very mechanical. Now, the issue here is that this kind of solidarity, though it's very important, it's not really scalable. It's not scalable by its nature because we only give when we have, usually, or when we want. You know, that's the way it works. And so far, we have been very proud about it, I think. But time has come as well to move forward. And we really need to move forward and to reach the level of structure solidarity. This structured solidarity must come, and that's the only way that will help us really to scale up on what we are doing. So the way I see it, actually, it's at a few different levels. First, let's start by the diaspora, how we can actually structure the solidarity from the diaspora and to scale it up. There is a role for everyone, and especially from the governments. The government actually must really start and design frameworks, systems, tools that would allow the diaspora investment to go into productive investment. You know, that's number one. You know, we have been working at AUDA NEPAD and with the African Union Commission to find ways and means really to utilize the remittances, but also other kind of investments of the diasporas, you know, and to put them into more productive investment. You know, investment from the diaspora can go, for instance, into public goods, into public infrastructures. It can also go into more savings actually to be invested into retirement plan. That's a way actually to go. It's very important really that we work all together to structure this. That's number one. Number two, I think it's also important for our governments and for our people to realize that so far African economies are structured around micro, small, and medium enterprises. Just few statistics. In 2018-2019, there are about 100 million micro, small, and medium enterprises in the continent. Out of those 100 million MSMEs, 92% are more like micro and small, and 90%, meaning 9 out of 10 micro and small businesses in Africa are informal. Informal means that they don't have access actually to public goods. They don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to retirement plan. They don't have access to pension. And they also don't necessarily pay taxes because they are not formal. And they don't also have access to the normal financial financing actually systems. Like they don't receive finance from the bank. They don't get access to the financing from the bank. And that's actually critical because if we talk about solidarity, and especially structured solidarity, we must keep in mind that structured solidarity starts first by the capacity to pay taxes, the capacity actually to contribute as well to the social system, especially the social protection system. But because our systems are so flawed, you know, so confusing, we don't offer opportunity to the micro and small, medium enterprises to really play their role in contributing to taxes, but also into the social protection system. So we are working very closely with governments to find ways and means to formalize our MSMEs. It's extremely important because formalizing MSMEs means that actually we are going to bring 92% of our existing businesses into the formal system. Bringing them into the formal system means that bringing them to contribute to taxes, so to contribute as well to the financing of our infrastructure, financing of public goods, as well, but also financing health systems and financing of the retirement systems that we have in Africa. Today, MSMEs accounts for 360 million jobs in Africa, and those 360 million jobs in the continent are all fragile jobs. You know, they don't have access to anything, but they could actually have access to more decent job. More decent job means actually at least have access to healthcare, have access to retirement plan. They could have access to those things if we help them and we work with government to make sure that we formalize them. And we can just imagine the impact on this, on our economies. And that's a way of giving as well, because that's a way. Formal and structured solidarity is actually really through structured access to public health, structured access to retirement. The other point, and which is as well very important, I think we don't talk much about it. African pension funds today, and we have pension funds in Africa, they have their assets is about $1.5 trillion. And imagine that the 1.5, this is the minimum actually, $1.5 trillion are all invested outside Africa. So why are we talking about solidarity and giving when our own actually pension are being invested outside the continent? So in AUDA NEPAD and with the African Union and other continental organizations, we put a target. We say, let's just find a way to encourage our pension fund to bring back to the continent only 5% of their asset into investing in infrastructure projects and public good, you know, in the continent. If we talk about giving, I think we must as well make sure that the money of our civil servants, the money of our workers who are working in the formal economy today should be reinvested into the continent and not invested through stock exchanges in Paris or London or New York, which is the case today. Yes, we need to invest there to grow actually those investments, you know, and to offer better retirement plan to our workers, but we must as well invest in our mother continent. And this is extremely important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that giving actually should really move. There is a theory of change to apply here. We should move from this very traditional way of charity, which is good, it works, it helps. But unless we move into a more structured way, you know, of giving, a more organized way, starting from governments, moving to our MSMEs to organize them, to bring them back or to bring them into the formal economy so they can create as well a job and they can contribute to pension, they can contribute to build our health system, you know, and then our own pension money, which is today invested outside the continent, bring it back to invest into the construction of our economy, the construction of our public infrastructure, the construction of our own public goods, and ease the access and bring back actually more equality and more inclusion, we will not be able really to make progress. And that will happen, and I'm going to conclude here, that will happen only and only if we bring better governance in our systems, in our countries. Better governance means actually economic system, governance system that actually work on more inclusive way, that are not extractive as we see today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you very much. Sometimes I forget that I'm moderating. I want this speech to go on and on because there are such urgent themes that you are all touching on today, and that theme about effective and good governance systems and creating inclusion as well. And many people keep saying over and over again that in the post-COVID world cannot be business as usual. And I think we ought to give meaning to that. If there are extractive practices, exclusionary economic practices that keep communities disadvantaged, then that ought to be shaken up as well. Thank you so very much for sharing your expertise and your observations in this regard, Mr. Amine Idriss Adoum. We're moving on. We're going to hear from CAPSI, Professor Jonathan Makuwira. We said in our introduction earlier that collaboration is what it's about. There's no country that is an island. There's no country that can move on its own without the expertise, the solidarity of its neighbors as well. So at this moment, we are going to get a research preview giving by African communities, and giving us the case study, the case for Malawi. And for that, we have Capri giving us that particular presentation or that particular speech, so we can learn more about what works in certain communities and what can be scaled up. Professor Jonathan Makuwira from CAPSI, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And colleagues, good afternoon, wherever you are. Greetings from the warm heart of Africa, and that is Malawi. So this is a background that I would like to start with, which CAPS has been funded by the Mott Foundation to try and understand community philanthropy in various parts of Africa. I call myself privileged because of the network that I have with CAPS, and I was brought in to try and also, further that understanding from Malawi's perspective. Now, for those of you who perhaps don't know where Malawi is, obviously we are bordered by Mozambique, southeast, southwest, northwest Zambia, and northeast Tanzania. So there we are with our beautiful lake. But maybe this slogan of the warm heart of Africa is not there by mistake. I think many people, if you ask about Malawi, will tell you that Malawians are kind-hearted people and very friendly. That, I think, is what I pick, even from the media. And I think in sharing this background to this particular research, bear that in mind. And I think the few examples that I would like to share with you may highlight that kind of background. So this study, which is done in four countries in Africa, is trying to understand what community philanthropy is all about. And in Malawi, I'm doing this to try and do an in-depth analysis of community giving in its many different dimensions. And I think we have heard stories so far of what is all that about. So communities indeed are faced with challenges. And I think in the past 2 years, and I want to emphasize the past 2 years, if not 3 now, Malawi has been hit with 2 major events. One is to do with climate event, and that is, if you recall, about Cyclone Ida, it really hit Mozambique very, very hard, Zimbabwe much harder, and of course Malawi partially, but the southern part of the country was severely hit. And last year, up until now, we have seen the effects of what COVID can do. And in Malawi, as is the case in many countries in Africa, not to mention around the world, was hardly hit. The issues that emerge from there are sometimes too traumatic and very depressing even to understand. But the privilege that I had to be able to go out and just mingle with the communities and hear their stories is what makes Africa very, very special. Special in the sense that the spirit of giving is in our DNA. And that is, and I would like to emphasize, a huge resource that Africa has, besides the fact that Africa offers probably the cheapest labor. But having said that, I would like maybe to highlight a couple of examples. And some of these examples are really to highlight, for example, what happened last year about COVID-19. In this one, I have to start from close home. Home in the sense that last year in July, we lost 2 colleagues at my university, and this is Malawi University of Science and Technology. We lost our university registrar, we lost one of our research fellows to COVID. Now, we discovered after we lost our university registrar that the registrar was supporting 10 students, needed students. Nobody knew about it. It was himself. Now, the registrar is gone, but these students now emerge because they have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to actually seek support. It was overwhelming as an institution. We didn't know. But now we knew that one individual had this big heart to say, I will do it without anybody knowing. It was himself and these students. And I have to say that this really struck me so hard to realize even that there are so many needy students at our institution, those who really could not do anything. And sometimes I have to say this, that I could sign in my privileged position as somebody responsible for academic matters, letters of students who are saying, please, can you reserve my place until next year, until in 2 years' time? It hit me so hard. But this is where now I realized, no, there is something that we have to do. And I'm saying this to start from home because it is important that charity begins at home. And so we had to, convince as management, what can we do? And indeed, it is overwhelming today to say the number of needy students who are at our institution, some of them as a result of COVID-19, losing both parents, some of them losing their guardians, those who support them, they are gone. Now they're withdrawing from school. They are withdrawing from their only chance in life. And this is where I witnessed, philanthropy at best, when colleagues came in to say, can I take 2? Can I take 3? There was another example that I would like to also share with you colleagues. And this is about one young girl who was once a street girl. But this charity organization in the southern part of our country said, no, we'll pick it out of there. This guy was taken back to primary school and she passed her exams. She went to secondary school, Form 1 to Form 4. She passed her exams and went to university, Malawi Polytechnic. She graduated. Because of the fact that she looked back and realized that it was people through a foundation who picked her, removed her from the street, she decided to form a kids foundation. Her name is Courageous, and that foundation is called Courageous Kids Foundation. One time, I was just going somewhere, and this girl stopped me to say, "Can you please help?" I said, "Help you with what?" Said, "I have kids who need to eat this morning porridge, and they have no lunch and they have no dinner." I became so curious about it. But nonetheless, anyway, after our conversations, I had no choice but partner with something. So I invited her home with her colleagues and her team. We had a conversation, and they took me to this particular place. Now, listen, colleagues, this is a place somebody had to donate his house to say, I would rather donate this house, which he was renting to someone else, to say, now, no rent, take this and grab these orphans from both Cyclone Ida, as well as those from COVID-19. I had the privilege to visit the place, to actually take a photo with these kids. I was shocked, but the overwhelming support that is going there is something that I call the spirit of Ubuntu, the spirit of humanness. And to cement the fact that Africans can actually turn things around. Last year, colleagues, I lost my mom on the 25th of June, 2020, to cervical cancer. My mom is gone. But I have to tell this story because it is significant as far as, for example, that horizontal philanthropy that we actually talk about. The number of people who came to mourn my mom. And I didn't know what this particular woman was in her village. And in fact, we used to, personally, I used to nickname her World Vision. You know World Vision. But jokingly, I used to say, Mom, for how long will you allow people to encroach your space? I was teasing her for a good reason. But I realized what an icon she was in the community. And when she passed on, that's when I actually said, truly, truly, when you give, you receive at a time when you don't know. My mom received when she was gone. But this is something that I witnessed, that within hours, people gave maize meal, they gave chicken, they gave goats, they even gave a whole cow to be used to feed people who came to mourn her. Not to mention, perhaps, well over 200,000 Rand equivalent supporting this. Now, I want you to imagine that. This is just one simple example. Not to mention, for example, how we even volunteer ourselves to do something. And even when she was in hospital, the number of people who came to visit her in the hospital. Now, bear in mind, she's in hospital amid the highest point of COVID-19 in Malawi. But people still came to the hospital and stayed outside for 2 hours, 3 hours, just sitting on the ground. Very, very overwhelming. I visited the southern part of the country where Cyclone AUDA hit very hard, deliberately just to appreciate what is happening there.
I think Prof is frozen a bit. We'll just give it a few seconds because this technology has a way of just rebooting itself. Okay. We'll just pause just 1 minute. We don't want to lose Prof. I think we've lost him. Have we lost him? Prof, are you still with us? Give it just, there you are. I think you muted. You are muted, Prof. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, well, technology has been so reliable for over an hour and a half is actually quite great going, but we're experiencing some difficulty, but we got the heart of Prof's message. But Prof, we will pause for just a few seconds because it's very likely that you can hear us and something can be done before we move on to the next speaker. So if everybody can just be patient for 1 minute as we try to recenter and get our bearings in order. Okay. All right. I think what we'll do now in the interest of time is just to carry on then, because we're nearly at the end of our event, of our launch. And Prof, we are in touch with you. Should there be an opportunity, should there be a message that you feel you absolutely have to share in your concluding remarks, please do indicate to us and we'll do the best that we can. But I think all of us were just moved by the story that you told about the young woman who, when doors were opened, it was clear that the streets were not the place for her. And if we can keep that in mind, that nobody belongs to the streets, nobody must go to bed hungry, nobody must be excluded from education. And I think the example that you used about access to education and the students that have fallen by the wayside simply because of a pandemic they didn't ask for, their caregivers, their support structures really are decimated by this pandemic. A lot of countries can identify with that. We have had this matter in South Africa as well for many years, that of exclusion, even outside of a pandemic, academic exclusion, not being able to pay for their fees, and also on some campuses launching some projects to feed the students, because once they have been admitted, once the fees have been taken care of, there is no money for transport, there is no money for food. So these are very real examples. They are small, but they are big, and they've got such an impact on future generations. So Prof, If you can hear us, do indicate to us if you still want to make your concluding remarks. But thank you very much for sharing those moving stories, those challenging stories. And also we send our condolences to you for your loss, and understanding that this has been such a time of grief and loss for so many people as well. Thank you so much, Professor Jonathan Makuwira from CAPSI. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Mr. Oswald Jumira. And again, this is a huge challenge as people register for vaccines, as people register for online learning, online work. We know that access to digital platforms and infrastructure is not equitable, that there is inequality where that is concerned. But how do we use the resources that we have? How do we even invest in these digital makeovers, these digital tools that we need to further our work? At this moment, we are going to hear about digital solutions and philanthropy, and really the need to improve the coordination between philanthropists, governments, and non-state actors in Africa, and how technology can play a role in that regard. Mr. Oswald Jumira, over to you.
Thank you very much, Radebe. I don't know, my video is not showing on my end. I guess you guys can see me.
Let's see. No, we can't see you, but we can hear you. It is loud and clear, but just carry on anyway. Okay, cool. I'd actually dressed up for the event, so I want to be a very happy guy. Okay. No, I'm just joking. Thanks very much, Radebe. And I think Itumeleng, if you can share the deck, I'll be grateful. Hello. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Yes, we can hear you, and we can see the screen as well.
Okay, cool. So as per the introduction, my name is Oswald, and I come from the Econet group. It's a pleasure being on this call today. Thanks very much to the CAPSI team and the Wits Business School. And kudos to Professor Becky for setting up this initiative. And I do believe from all the other speakers that have spoken that this is something that is groundbreaking and something that is very necessary for our continent. And thank you very much to my sister from another mother, Berita. It's great to hear some local African music. And I do believe that if we all go back, we'll realize that music has been the driver for a lot of struggles on this continent. And there's a lot of cultural imperatives around music. And lately, we've seen so much collaboration on the continent driven by music. And there's been a sharing of cultures. And based on that, I do believe that with the Kisima Resilience Initiative, if we can borrow from what the musicians have done on the continent in terms of collaborations, I do believe there's a lot to learn and a lot of success ahead of us. So my role primarily within the Econet group is on digital platforms and innovation. So I'm the tech guy in the house. And because of that, I was very much privileged over the last 12 months to work very closely with the chairman of Econet, Strive Masiwa, who's also my boss, on his special envoy role, which he was appointed by President Ramaphosa to spearhead innovations, digital supply platforms, and also look at the acquisition of vaccines for the continent. So I've been on numerous calls on a day-to-day basis with many parties across the continent, including people like Vera Songwe from UNECA, Dr. John Kengason. I talk to Dr. John nearly every day, Professor Rama from Africangiving Bank, and also a number of other senior leaders that President Ramaphosa brought in to look into how to come up with an African solution for COVID. And during that time, I was very privileged enough to also work with a number of philanthropic organizations and some foundations, donors across the continent, DFIs, that were all looking at ways of actually assisting Africa during this period of COVID. And as I earlier on alluded to Prof, my background is in technology. So all of those opportunities that everyone was highlighting, some were highlighting them as challenges. I bring in the technology to make it happen. And that is what excites me on a day-to-day basis. When someone talks about remittances into Africa, my question that I always say is, if you are to look back, what is it that really drove the increase in the amounts of remittances into Africa? I'll tell you, for no money, it has been technology. It is now so easy to move money across borders within Africa and beyond Africa. And this has been enabled by digital technology, all driven by the mobile phone that we hold in our hands on a day-to-day basis. And going back again to the topic of the day that I'm just going to be speaking about, Itumeleng, you can move to the next slide. There's been quite a lot of work on this continent in terms of technology. We have leapfrogged many continents in how we have leveraged on technology, either to deliver financial services, to deliver healthcare, to also deliver communication among our people. And as we do that, we are actually leapfrogging the whole world and taking advantage of the opportunities we have on this continent. The legacy that other continents have, we do not have. We are starting off from a mobile first continent, and because of these opportunities, we are definitely geared to actually outpace some of the other continents. And because of this technology, initiatives like Kisima Resilience Initiative should definitely leverage on technology from a perspective of communication, telling the story, and also mobilization of funds. It's easier now because of technology to put up a GoFund page on the internet and connect it to a payment platform and collect funds for any initiative that you might come up with. And because of technology, we are speaking today and meeting each other online under this light touch economy that is now defining our livelihoods. So we have a new norm today where we are definitely changing our lifestyles, changing the way we work, changing the way we hold events, and changing the way we interact with each other. And because of that, technology has become the center of all our conversations today. The most popular term over the last 12 months has been the Zoom popular term that says you're on mute. Everyone has said that word a lot of times. And it's because of the trajectory of where we are going now, where we are now conversating more using digital platforms. I'll go back again to COVID. During COVID, when COVID came up, there were many challenges that came onto our continent. There are so many things that happened that probably many people might not be privy to. But to me, I'm very proud of how Africa reacted to COVID. I saw a lot of people coming together, countries coming together. The African Union, through the leadership of President Ramaphosa, was probably at its best ever in this lifetime of mine. I'm not very old, so I wouldn't know what happened during the Kwame Nkrumah days. But what I can also say now is that special envoys were deployed. Member states created task forces in every country. There was aggressive approach to the reaction to COVID. Africa CDC stood up. Dr. John became the man in the town, the popular guy in town, and he was really championing the interventions on COVID. We saw a big challenge earlier on where COVID supply was limited. Funding also started trickling in from the big World Bank. We saw some developmental banks also coming in. Lockdowns and curfews became the order of the day. In South Africa, they call it, we've got a family gathering when the president meets up and then he gives us an instruction on which level we're moving to. When you look at education, it was highly disrupted because of COVID, and obviously travel was restricted for a very long time. Now we are in this vaccination era where we are having vaccines in short supply. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is the last in the queue. We've been last in the queue for many decades, but I think going forward, we definitely have to refuse this. In terms of delivery and administration of vaccines, very limited. A lot of vaccine hesitancy coming up lately. The infrastructure to support that, not very prevalent. Manufacturing is something we need to come up with. All the people on this continent need to all focus on the fact that why do we wait on India or Europe to give us vaccines? Why can't we make the vaccines down here? Obviously, expertise is something that we need to invest in. So these are some of the characteristics that we saw that actually were linking to all the events that were happening over the last 12 months with respect to COVID. Itumeleng, you can move to the next slide. So one of the things that I was privy to be involved in are certain digital platforms that were developed during this period to address some of the opportunities I highlighted in the previous slide. So I led a team together with a company called Django, led by a very brilliant lady entrepreneur from Senegal called Fatoumata Ba. We worked over the last 12 months on this platform, the Africa Medical Supplies platform, led by Strive Masiwa, and we've managed to actually distribute and large volumes of COVID consumables across the country. This platform was set up because we did not have COVID supplies on the continent. They were very expensive for African countries. And we realized that we have the power of numbers on this continent. 1.2 to 3 billion people, we definitely use those numbers to push for price reductions. And we also brought transparency on the distribution, and we also brought transparency on pricing. You remember the scandals around COVID, where a mask was probably $20 at one point, which is now less than $1. And all of that also is attributed to this digital platform that we brought in. So we developed an Amazon-type platform for all African medical supplies. Right now, we are pushing vaccines through the same platform. And the collaborators that made this happen were big multinationals like Africangiving Bank. We had also partnership with people like Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. We also worked with partners like MasterCard Foundation, MTN, UNICEF, in order to actually make sure that this platform is up and running. Many organizations are purchasing through this platform. The Trusted Travel platform is another platform I was also involved in, directly working with Dr. John Kengason and his team, where we were now looking at these digital passports that are going to become popular as we go along. It is going to be very difficult to travel the world without a digital passport. And a digital passport will actually include your COVID vaccination results. So we've built a platform for the African continent where we can actually interchange information across countries and enable people to move across the continent. There were a number of partners that came on board to make this a reality. Top of mind is Panabios. These are a Ghanaian-led team that is also developing digital solutions for the continent. We have guys like Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement team. We also had UNECA, we also had WHO, we had the civil aviation authorities coming on board to actually support the deployment of this technology platform. And all of these platforms have been made a reality through collaborations, partnerships, and the leadership that has been shown through the continent. One of the pain points of COVID, ladies and gentlemen, has been the fact that many kids did not go to school for months. And the privileged kids, middle class, upper class, were privileged enough that their parents had internet at home and they could continue learning on Zoom. But the bulk of all those at the bottom of the pyramid, our African cousins, brothers, and relatives did not make it to school because of COVID. We have a generation that has missed 12 months of school, potentially 18 months because of the ripple effect of not going to school. And there have been a lot of initiatives led by UNESCO through the Global Education Coalition, looking into building a platform that enables kids to access educational content across the continent, especially targeting the underprivileged kids. This is an area where, ladies and gentlemen, as we mobilize funds, let's not forget that we have a generation that has suffered a lot because of lack of access to education. The last example I'll give on some of the examples that have happened on the continent is a project led by Prakalt from South Africa. These guys looked at building a digital platform that enables communication between health workers in terms of alerts, in terms of any other information people need in terms of education around COVID. It is very important to realize that digital platforms are what enables scalability of any interventions. Gone are the days where we leverage on face-to-face communication or we leverage on travel all the time. Digital platforms are going to be the center of how we deploy education, healthcare, financial services, utility services that we are looking at accessing. And you realize that the Prakalt Health Connect initiative brought together the South African government, it brought together the development world, and also institutions like WHO and the Clinton Health Access. And all of these collaborations, as I highlighted initially, these are the ones that brought success. You saw private sector coming in, the development world coming in, academics, institutions also played a part, and governments played a very, very important role. As I said earlier on, I believe that COVID brought up the Pan-African element of many leaders on this continent. Dr. John will tell you that we've had numerous meetings with presidents in Africa, leaders in civic society, and everyone is championing the fact that we need African-grown solutions. And I come in from a generation that is digitally driven, looking at the fact that we can also develop our digital platforms to support Kisima Resilience Initiative and make sure that there's transparency, there's accountability, there's reach, and our stories can now be told digitally on YouTube and all these other platforms that we all consume. Going to the last slide, Itumelekeng, all I'm just calling upon now is, as we look at supporting Kisima here, I'm not a very experienced individual in the development world, but I build technology. And I believe that if you throw a problem to me, I'm able to build something that brings us together. And according to our continent, we have to go together if we want to go far. There's no reason for us to work in silos. There's no reason for us not to work together and support this initiative. And my job as the techie in the house is to support technology in enabling us to achieve the objectives of Kisima. Radebe, thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Oswald. The passion in your voice. And I think all you tech people are like that, hey? Always fired up, looking for solutions, and that's what it's all about. I really love how you have kind of demystified this world of technology. You know, it's not some geek nerds sitting out there outside of our planet, but right here as you try to solve life problems, and how you really situated the problems of the moment and using the technological prism to just put on the table some possible solutions, reminding us yet again of the children who have lost a year. In fact, it's more than a year and a half of school, and that is likely to continue. Here in South Africa, we are in the middle of a third wave with this, the city and the province in which I live, Gauteng, Johannesburg, experiencing the highest number of COVID cases, and there's talk of schools closing again. In some instances, children have not been able to return to school since last year, and those that don't have access to technology have been left behind. We have been grappling with how we can make our public broadcaster more accessible, more able to dispatch some lessons. They've done their best, but we know that it's very difficult to cover all corners of the country. Telcos were being challenged, the network, cell phone network companies were being challenged to zero rate some of their content, and many of them did so last year, but that also came with all sorts of problems. But that last a slide that you talked about, opening the world of possibilities, to say, hey, I don't know much about development finance, but I can take the ideas and bring technology to bear so that solutions can be found. Thank you so very much. And we know that with the situation of COVID, we can't be together physically, but were it not for technology, we wouldn't be able to carry on with our work, a work of solidarity, a work of giving, and a work of ensuring that our continent remains, you know, stable even during a pandemic. So with this initiative and this campaign, technology will play a huge part in connecting us wherever we may be on the African continent. Thank you so very much for that, Mr. Oswald Jumira. Okay, so this is the part of the program where I want to hear from our audience. If somebody's not shy, and there's something that you want to share about how you have seen giving manifest itself in your community, in your organization, your place of work, your churches, whatever, perhaps you can indicate to us by just switching on your microphone, introducing yourself, and just sharing. This is not a time for speeches. It's not time for speeches. I'm just asking you to share some of your learnings and your observations as well. I did invite you to make your comments also known onto the chat box. You can do that if you're too shy to speak, to just put your comments and your questions, to talk about what this initiative means for you today, what Kisima means for you, what it means to be reflecting on different ways of giving, of sharing stories, of positioning this continent as a place of resilience, of possibility, as a place where we look out for one another, as a place where we share what we have with one another, but as a place that is very much a contributor to the global market of ideas. That what brings us here together today is not just about ensuring that your neighbor has food. It's not just about that. Many of you have talked about the vertical structures, the formalizing our philanthropic acts, formalizing our giving, so that we change communities, we change society, and we change our continent. Perhaps you have ideas to share about strengthening these partnerships between the philanthropic world, corporate world, and the state or governments, as it were. So you can share those with us as well. You can make your comments known on the chat room. I'm just going through some of the comments. Berita, wherever you are, there is such great appreciation for your talent. Many people are thanking you. Beautiful music. Thank you, Berita, and so on. And there there are others who've had to jump off to other meetings as well, but they value this initiative. They want you to stay in touch. And we also have some people who were challenged by technology, and I think that's Prof saying, really sorry, technology failed me, but hope the little I was able to share was heard. Well, Prof Jonathan, it wasn't little. It really wasn't little. It was profound, it was relatable, and really gave us food for thought. So thank you so very much for that. And then just some comments, is it Kuma saying, thank you, this was very informative. I especially enjoyed the presentation on digital solutions. We really need this kind of innovation to scale up giving. Well, thank you so very much about that. I need to say that we have a challenge with electricity in South Africa, and I see that I'm on the load shedding schedule. So if I get cut off, don't despair. I've got a backup. I will need just 30 seconds to get organized and rejoin you again. So at this moment, if you have any comments, any questions, does anyone have a question? I'll just pause for 1 minute so that anybody who has a question, you can switch on your microphone and then speak. If you have ideas around how to make Kisima come to life, or if you have some case studies that you want to share with us about giving in African circumstances and African conditions and how we can scale it up, I want to hear from you. I will pause for just 1 minute to allow for that to happen. And if I go off, don't leave. I'm going to reconnect. So just pausing for 1 minute to give you an opportunity to ask your questions or make your comments. Anybody?
I have my hand up.
Yes, please go for it. Introduce yourself and go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Jonathan Makuwira from Malawi,
Prof.
and of course representing CAPSI here. Look, there's one narrative that has killed Africa, and that is the word development. And I want to say that for a long time it has been top down, and we have firmly believed in this. Even big people in government have, up until now, believing in this false narrative. If I were to quote someone else, I would be this fake news that development has come from top down. It's time for us now to stand firm and say this is fake news because it is organic from people up. And what we are doing today is the beginning of changing this narrative that has killed Africa for a long time. My field is development studies. I go in class and challenge this kind of theorization of development because it's not a given thing. It is from people, it is from the heart. People make it. All we lack is the support. And because for a long time we have depended from support from outside, we have been decapacitated, but this is the beginning of just realizing how rich we are just on social capital alone. Let us begin to shift the narrative. Those of us in academia, let us challenge these false theories, fake news. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. You'd be glad to hear that there are people who had already said this on the chat room. I'm just going to read them for some of the comments that have come through. One says, when we talk about formalizing our giving to enable it to be scaled up, what exactly do we mean? Often formalizing means restructuring it into the Western philanthropic model that we are used to in the world of philanthropy. I wonder if it is possible to rather research the ways that our indigenous models of giving have been sustained over the years and rather build on our own models of giving and then popularize. So indigenize the formal instead of formalizing, meaning westernizing the indigenous. Example, M-Pesa. The founders just followed our trend of giving and built a system to support it. Can we do that for our giving in its various indigenous forms? What do we mean by formalize, often westernizing things, excluding many of our people? I say, sorry for my long post. No, not at all. Thank you so very much for that contribution. And Prof, you'll be glad to hear that your position and many of you's position on this is one that is embraced by so many of our guests today. I'm going to read this next a comment as well from Elsabe. Says, as the CEO of the National Youth Development Outreach in Eersterust, Pretoria, we use storytelling and drumming circles to tell community stories in the past. You just remind me that we need to restart this process again in the communities. Collaboration between stakeholders is very important to grow this program. I'm just thinking again, when you're talking about indigenous forms of giving, and that it doesn't have legitimacy simply because it is Western or formalized, whatever that means. But where I grew up, we had not stokvels, but mothers' societies. It sounds like a stokvel because there was an exchange of money, some form of investment. But what I remember about my mother and my grandmother's membership to the mothers' societies was not the money that exchanged hands. We never saw that. But it was that these were the people who always pitched when there was a need, whether it's a funeral, it's a wedding, a feast, whatever it was. When there's an accident, they just pitched, and there was that spirit of community, that spirit of solidarity, and everybody had belonging across class lines, across ages. And the fathers also had their own societies at times, but not as popular as those that were attended by our mothers, and really were pillars of our society, really gave meaning to community, to solidarity, to support as well. There were also instances where we were educated as young girls, where we'd be invited to these spaces so that we can really feed off the wisdom of our community mothers. So that's just an idea that just came into my mind as well. Okay, so there are some comments that are coming through, mainly appreciation, congratulating the partners, really hoping, perhaps the word scale up is not the right one, but popularizing and bringing in more organizations as we start this particular journey. You're being congratulated for this initiative. Okay, so what we're going to do then is continue to get your comments, continue to get your engagement, continue to get your pledges to the Kisima Resilience Fund, continue to get your pledges of ideas, because that's what will keep it going and will popularize it. Your ideas are also welcome. Along the theme of African philanthropy is, and you can add whatever it is that you want to add. Before I introduce—
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much for your generosity. Thank you. These are our circumstances. We just do the best that we can. We continue taking your comments. We continue taking your thoughts. And as we do that, as you make your ideas known to us, and I think that doesn't have to end today. I'm sure in your closing remarks, Professor Moyo, you'll also tell us about how our audience can continue to engage with you, bring their expertise, be it technology, be it their own case studies, whatever it is, that we can open that door for that ongoing exchange of experiences and stories to continue. So let me give you the platform right now, Professor Moyo, to just give us the closing remarks and also what the future looks like.
Thank you very much, Radebe. Beautifully facilitated webinar. Thank you so much. So where to from here? I think there are 3 stages that I want to talk to. The first is we are obviously going to build a platform where to store and deposit these stories. And these stories can come in their different forms. It could be research findings. We mentioned that there is research ongoing, but we are not just going to upload research from our own researchers, but we will link up with other research institutes that are focusing on these issues. But there's also the issue of what the current technology brings on board. So we can take stories in the form of voice notes, in the form of videos, in the form of articles, blogs. We are currently doing some documentaries on giving across some countries in Africa. So that is going to be something that we are going to focus on a lot. We are also launching a podcast, a philanthropy podcast that will be a hybrid between pre-recorded and live events starting from the month of August. And so we are going to use that platform to also harvest and showcase some of these positive and resilient stories. There's also the publication of the book that OSF foundations have supported, and we are looking forward to validating some of the research outcomes and findings from that. So I think that, that's the first dimension of the initiative as it was described. And so these are some of the activities to look forward to. And this will be ongoing. We are not going to put a time frame to this because stories will be coming forth. We have not showcased these stories enough. And so we want to dedicate a lot of time towards harvesting them and sharing them widely. The second part is obviously, the finalizing the technical details of the fund. We have already started speaking to some of the people to give it credibility. And so Mrs. Marshall and Mrs. Judy Dlamini have agreed to be the initial patrons of the initiative. We still are going to be talking to other representatives of other regions because we want this to be Pan-African. But it was important for us to launch the initiative, at least with some patrons already in place. We will also be building a collection platform that would include issues that have to do with governance, that have to do with the actual pledging. And I think also I'll already begin talking about how his work and that of others is going to be aligned to this role. So we'll communicate through our different platforms, channels, the next steps regarding the fund. But the platform for collecting the stories is something that we are ready to already showcase immediately. And then we obviously have to build the measurement and impact assessment mechanisms. And we are going to align these to some of our modules that we are offering at the Wits Business School that CAPSI has developed. And so we see this as a spectrum really, from practice to analysis to even influence that it could have on people and policies. I want to end by, of course, thanking everyone who has made this possible. And I know my colleague Velapi will come and make some of his inputs, but I want to thank the OSF foundations, especially the Africa foundations, for believing in the idea first, partnering with us and funding the research on COVID-19 and the 3 sectors that we referred to. Our partners, NEPAD, thank you very much for doing this once again. We have a very beautiful partnership on issues that contain the continent. The Africa Philanthropy Network, thank you very much, Stigmata, and the membership for coming on board. GMT, especially Mrs. Marshall and Leila and the team, thank you very much for availing yourselves, even at short notice, whenever we need you. The Malawi University of Technology, Prof. Jonathan. Jonathan is not just a vice chancellor there, he's also a member of CAPSI and has been heavily involved in some of our research. And so thank you very much in the work that you are doing. I also want to thank Oswald from Liquid Telecoms for not just writing that paper, but for helping us build a sound and credible knowledge platform that would showcase some of these stories. Of course, this would not have happened without the work of my colleagues at CAPS. So I really want to thank Kira, I want to thank Tandi, I want to thank Kensani, I want to thank Polani, who have been behind all of this work. And of course, the OSISA team that has also worked very, very closely with us. Our development partners that support our work, thank you very much. And we will be communicating some of the next steps through our various platforms, but I want to end there already. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Moyo. Really, really appreciate that. And I'm very excited to hear the, it's always said that you've got to communicate to people in ways that are documentaries is really, really appealing. And if I can lend a hand in that regard, what I love about it is that the new forms that young people are using to communicate, to create content. So it is not an intimidating space for them to also get involved. Thank you so very much. Everything going off, I no longer have my program in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, coming up next will be word from OSISA, the Open Societies Initiative of Southern Africa, if I'm not mistaken, and Velapi will be our representative there. Over to you.
Thank you, Radebe, and wonderful afternoon to everyone. It's good to see this beautifully choreographed webinar. Thank you so much for handling it expertly. And thank you also to all our speakers and the participants who've made it here, as well as our partners, CAPSI, for the hard work that has gone into this. I think, as our director stated earlier on this afternoon, we really see this as an initiative that is going to be really a game changer in terms of promoting African self-reliance and resilience, because the endogenous nature of this initiative means that it's going to be owned by Africans, driven by Africans, managed by Africans, and it's aimed at helping Africans. So I believe as an institution, we believe that it's important for Africans to be in the driving seat of their own future. And initiatives like the Kisima initiative is one that is really going to be exciting to see unfold going forward. So we just want to offer our support to say that this is something we want to see through. All the Africa foundations have actually coalesced around this, and we want to commit to our partner CAPSI and to everyone here that this is an initiative that we really want to see our African people metaphorically drinking from. We understand that Kisima actually means a source of water. In Siswati, in my language, we call it umthombo, and that's where there is a source of life, because water is life, and we have it in abundance on the continent. So we hope that this is not just an initiative for the sake of hosting this webinar, but it's a pragmatic contribution to a new and alternative way of looking and envisioning the continent, placing Africans at the center of their own future and destiny. We've seen how COVID has really destabilized our communities. And we believe that the era of cap in hand, where Africa is begging from the rest of the world, is over. Any support that is given to the continent should complement our own efforts. And as after speaker has said here, that has always been the case. African people have always given. In fact, giving is a way of life in Africa because of the communal values that we've always held and that we continue to hold, notwithstanding modernization, industrialization, and all these other forces that are visited upon the continent. So we believe that that's the way to go. And we are happy that today you are seeing this initiative taking root. And as Professor Moyo has said, in the next couple of months, we will really be concretizing the modalities of how this fund in particular is going to look like. And in our heads, we don't necessarily have a brick and mortar fund sitting somewhere, but we really have to take into account some of the points and the issues that have been raised here, that, you know, indigenous giving systems and ways by African people should be at the center of how Kisima is structured. And in as much as we may eventually have a physical fund, but we don't want to do away with those people-based and people-driven ways that people use for giving in their various communities across the continent. I would just like to end by reminding us that Africa isn't a poor continent. It is rich in its mineral resources, but most importantly, it is rich in its people. And the people of this continent are the ones that are going to be, to make the continent the future of the world. And it is upon us to make sure that every single African born in this continent or living in other continents feels a sense of belonging and a sense of pride that they can look back to their continent as the continent of the future. Thank you very much for the time and for the opportunity. Thank you to the CAPSI team for the hard work, Berita for the beautiful music. Muthoni was telling me earlier that she thinks we should have biomusic in all our meetings. So thank you so much for that. And lastly, thank you, Radebe, for your expert facilitation. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to the work ahead. It is doable, it is achievable. Together as Africa, we are one, and we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. I really love the special focus on what Africa has been bringing to the table, because it's not a new thing, but the special focus on why we are such an important player in this global market of ideas and changing the world and changing societies. You know, as you were speaking, Velapi, I know we're not doing a pitting ourselves against the global north, but I was forever fascinated in the early stages of COVID-19, how mask wearing became a political thing. It wasn't just in the United States, but in the Western world, there was a lot of debate around, are we required to do this? Are we required to do this? This is curbing our civil liberties and so on. And here at home, and by home, I mean Africa, when people are not wearing masks, there could have been an affordability issue or just the human tendency to make mistakes. Someone has forgotten or so, but it was never done as a political thing that I have a right not to wear a mask and I'm not going to be thinking about anyone else. That was something that was unique to a different part of the world. I use that example to really challenge myself and build on what you were all saying about why must everything be modeled around how the West does things? Why is efficiency and impact measured using pillars that are crafted in the Western world? We've got our own pillars that have stood the test of time, and mask wearing was just one of those things where here in not wearing a mask, chances are they're like, you know, it's my right not to wear a mask, but endowed with that as well, our youth and how the youth is in our communities. So thank you so very much for getting your thoughts, continue getting your contributions around African giving and what it means for you. And so, you know, Berita, I'm picking on you again because it seems that everyone is just hanging around not to hear me give my closing remarks. I can guarantee you, but everyone is hanging around just to get that last final word from you. I wonder if you've got some.
I think we lost Radebe. Berita, you can go ahead. Oh, okay, she's back. She's back. You're on mute, sis Radebe. You're on mute.
Okay, I beg your pardon. We've got load shedding in my area and all these gadgets aren't working in the way that I want them to work. But Berita, if you are listening, if you can hear me, we really would like to hear from you as we wrap up our launch and our event today.
Berita, just unmute, please. We can't hear.
This always happens, isn't it? Was it Oswald who said earlier that the word that was used so much, or the term that was used so much during the pandemic was, you are on mute, you're on mute. We've all said it to others at one point or another, or had it said to us. Berita, if you're there, please unmute so we can hear your inspirational sounds.
Hi there, Radebe. Sorry about that. We had a bit of a technological glitch, but we are back, and I wanted.
That's fine. It happens.
I wanted to take you to East Africa, since we are talking about Kisima, Umthombo. There's a song that I recorded. It's a Swahili song. It's On the lighter side of things, it's a love song, but I saw it fitting to close our session today.
Excellent.
Sema basi nasikia mpenzi wangu shida gani? Sema basi nasikia onana onana, shika mkono mpenzi wangu, mimi nawe pak milele, zunge basi tucheze onana onana. Mungu anajua unanipa furaha, Mungu anajua moyo wangu ni yako mpaka milele, mpaka milele, enana mpaka milele, mpaka milele, ona ona ona. Usijali na dunia, mambo yote itapita, unanipa maisha, wanana, wanana, shika mkono penzi wangu, mimi nawe pak milele, zunge basi tucheze, wanana, wanana. Mungu anajua unanipa furaha, Mungu anajua moyo wangu ni yako mpaka milele, mpaka milele, enana mpaka milele, mpaka milele, ona ona ona, mpaka milele, enana mpaka milele, mpaka milele, onana. Mungu anajua unanipa furaha, Mungu anajua moyo wangu ni yako mpaka milele, mpaka milele, onana mpaka milele, mpaka milele, ona ona ona.
Oh, sensational. Berita, thank you so very much. I can tell you this event today would not have had quite the flavor that we've had were it not for you. Your presence amongst us has been so heartwarming. Thank you so very much. I'm sure from today, so many will be following you very, very closely. Thanks indeed. I hope you were all inspired, that listening to the different case studies, listening to the different ideas, and most importantly, reaffirming the spirit of African giving, that this is the beginning of a new and beautiful and inspirational chapter, and that should we gather again in a couple of months, we would have had more work, scaling up, popularizing, and more successes. I wish you all the best of luck and goodwill as we continue the work of building our continent. I've loved being your moderator. Thank you for inviting me. Goodbye.